So do you ever wonder why some people in the onslaught of life can kind of turn hard and dark, and other people in the onslaught of life are able to keep open and softer and have the ability to reach out to others even as the onslaught comes on? I wondered about this with my Grandma and Grandpa Meyer. I've told you about them before. They're very poor. They lived on the wrong side of the tracks in Charles City, Iowa, and tar paper shacks that didn't have any hot water, and that had an outside two-hole or outhouse with its own built-in beehive in the summer, which was very fun. They kept vegetables. They had a big vegetable garden, and they canned them and had a big root cellar and put them in the root cellar. And I wondered why they were always so upbeat. I mean, not that they didn't get angry and ticked off, things like that happen. But generally speaking, I mean, compared to the lives that my mom and dad, my brother and I had, I mean, their lives were, quote, awful, so I thought. And I wondered about that until one day when my Grandpa Meyer, he took us fishing, us being my brother Dan, myself, my cousin Bobby, and Kenny. We were all about the age, right around 10 years old. And my grandpa took us as an excuse to go fishing because he had a sign on the wall of his blacksmith shop that said 3/4 of the world is water and 1/4 of the world is land. Therefore, we should spend 3/4 of our time fishing. The logic made sense to him. So he drives us off to go fishing. But when we get out on the highway, he pulls over to the side of the road. And he said, "Boys, I want you to bow your heads. We're going to pray." Well, my brother and I, we went to church every Sunday, and we prayed at church, and we said grace before supper, but you don't pray before you go fishing, we thought. But guess what? My grandpa did. And it was a simple prayer. It was something like, thank you for this wonderful day, for these cousins who don't get to spend a lot of time together. Phew, that got me. Don't get to spend a lot of time together, and for this day that we might stay safe. And so we went and we fished. And it wasn't a bad day. It was a good day of fishing. The fish were biting, and we pulled several of them out, and I got one that was pretty long. I thought, whoa, that's pretty great. And my cousin Bobby, he got one that was pretty big, and he said, whoa, that's great. And among all the other fish that we caught, we were proudest of these. And in the car on the way home, we were kind of going at it. I think my fish is probably the best fish that we caught. Bobby said, no, your fish might be longer, but it's not bigger. Mine's actually bigger. It weighs more. That's how. Well, it really doesn't matter because this fish is faster than your fish. And we're doing this, we're arguing like this all the way into the house, into my grandma's house. And she hears us, my fish is the greatest. No, your fish isn't. Mine is because it's. And Grandma says, what are you arguing about? Whose fish is the greatest or not? Makes no difference whatsoever. I said, well, we thought it was pretty cool. No, she said, what's cool is where you got that fish. We went, from the river? No. Who you got that fish from? We went, Grandpa? No. Grandpa didn't get you no fish. God got you the fish. Praise God in all things, she said. Praise God in all things. And that's when the light went off. That's how my grandma and grandpa did it. they praised God in all things. That's what our text is about today. That psalm that Heather read. Sing to the Lord a new song, it says. Sing to the Lord a new song. And the nation of Israel had been, in slavery, and then they were brought out of slavery. But while they were traveling 40 years in the wilderness, they weren't singing to the Lord a new song. They were grumpy wumpies about how bad the food was, and this wasn't really, the accommodations were not all that good. And Moses got upset with them, of course, and then when they get into their own land finally, they become pretty doggone sure of themselves. They wanted to become a nation among the other nations, and so they wanted a king. And so, against God's good judgment, God said, well, all righty, you want a king? I'll give you a king. And they got a king, and they felt like they were one of the greatest among the nations. And then the psalmist comes along, and he writes this enthronement psalm. And the enthronement psalm is a psalm that enthrones God above any other king, above any other royal personage, in fact, above all of Israel, so that the king would have to know that the king isn't king, that God is king. Now, if you were my Grandma Meyer, you'd go right along with that, and you'd say, yeah, God's on a cloud, and sitting up there with a crown and a scepter, and God's all-powerful, and so God meddles with things down here on earth. And I knew fairly early on that I didn't believe in that kind of a God. I believed, and do believe now, in a God that is actually not a person, but a force and energy that makes persons and relationships and community and marriage and friendships possible. The definition of that God comes from 1 John. God is love. Love is a verb. And as a verb, God is this connective power between us, creating all kinds of possibility because we're more connected to one another than we think we are. So, it doesn't really matter, because I guess in that way my God meddles with us too in a little different kind of way. So Grandma and I weren't that far apart. It says, sing to the Lord a new song. And I would like to suggest today that to sing praise to God is to find new songs to sing. The first song that is sung, the first new song, is the song of humility. That when you praise God, you discover humility. Rob Bell, who's a Christian writer and a surfer out west, he took his surfboard out. He often did this, and just kind of lollygagged out in the water beyond where the breakers are, just to be meditative and to enjoy that space. And then when he wanted, he'd paddle in to where the breakers were, and he'd surf in. Well, one such day, he is out there in the water on his surfboard, and he feels the water beneath him begin to move in a different way. And he looks over to his left, and he sees this blackness coming up out of the water. And this blackness moves him to the side. And it's a whale that is actually coming to the surface right next to him. And he's on this little surfboard. And at first he freaks out, thinking, I'm in big trouble. And he puts his hand over on the whale. Touches it a little gingerly at first, and then he realizes it's okay. And then the whale nudges into him a little bit. Just nudges, moves him a little bit. He's being a little playful. And he realizes, whoa, this is something else. You feel pretty humble. when you're on a surfboard out in the ocean and a whale surfaces next to you. You realize how small you actually are. Humility is about proportion. It's about the way in which you realize that you have a place in something much larger than you are. Humility makes a space then for other people, because the large context is God's context. And you know that you're not the one with the big fish. The big fish is right next to you. It just came up out of the water. There's the big fish. That guy right there. Yeah. Humility. Praise breeds humility. When he was, touching the whale, after nudging him, then turned himself. The whale turned so that the whale was actually looking right at him. And the whale's eye was right there, right in front of his face. He's on his surfboard, and the whale, he realizes, is not out to hurt him. He thought maybe earlier that, the whale would just have him for a snack. But no, he wanted a relationship. He enjoyed this little thing that was going on. And he breathed this deep breath of thanksgiving. I'm not going to be anybody's snack. I've got a new friend. The second song that we sing is the Song of Thanksgiving. It's a song that comes up when we are aware that this larger context, God actually is not out after us, but creates all these different kinds of opportunities for us in life. The word thanks in Hebrew is todah, but the to comes from the word tov, which means good. And in the first chapter of Genesis, God said it was good, God said it was good, God said it was tov, all the way down, it's tov. And da means to apprehend or to see. So thanksgiving is to see goodness. So it's not like, I go to Bethany and she says, I have something for you. I say, really? Isn't that great? And she gives me some fancy guitar that I'm really going to love. And I go, whoa, thank you very much. That's great. Ooh, look at this guitar. I'm really thankful for this guitar. It's really So that's how we tend to think of giving thanks usually. But to see goodness, I see this goodness in her, that there's goodness moving through her, that she would actually understand that I wanted something like that, or that it might complete me in some way. I begin to see goodness. And when you see goodness, it multiplies itself. It doesn't stop. You keep seeing goodness. You see it here, you see it there. It rains, you still see goodness. Bad things happen. You want to stop and go, how are we going to find some goodness? Well, let's sing the song of thanksgiving, Let's sing the song of thanksgiving, because there is goodness in the world, and we want to see it. And of course, that was the case with my grandma and Grandpa Meyer, They just saw goodness all over the place. Even to us bratty boys coming in and bragging about the fish. Who's the best? Who's the greatest? She saw the goodness in us nonetheless. Tomorrow I had a professor at Union Seminary whose name is the Reverend Dr. James Cone. He's an African-American liberation theologian. He was born in Arkansas in the mid-30s. His parents were sharecroppers. He grew up in that difficult area in the South where African Americans had no legal standing, no legal recourse at that time, and they went to church. Every Sunday they went to church. And when they went to church, they would sing. Not just for an hour, like, sometimes you can see, boy, it's getting close to the hour. I hope Denny stops preaching about now. No, they didn't do that. They sang for hours. They sang together. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Every time I feel the Spirit, hours singing. And what the Reverend Doctor said about this singing was that you had to praise God until you felt the strength, until you felt the power, until you felt God's empowerment in your own soul. Because he said those who came before us who were slaves, they sang too. They had their church services and they lived with masters and slaves. But they were not going to allow the masters to define the context in which they lived. No, they were going to get together and sing as loud and as long as they could until that empowerment moved up inside of them and they realized God would not let them down. It's the song of strength, the new song of strength that praise of God brings. To praise God is to sing the song of humility. It's to sing the song of thanksgiving and to sing the song of strength, confidence, empowerment. I know you say, oh yeah, so what am I going to do? Well, I suggest you get up every morning and say, what? This is incredible. Look at this world. I woke up today. That's amazing. Or maybe you're not as expressive as I can be sometimes. And maybe for you it's waking up and going, look here. I'm living in this wonderful surrounding. I have a family, a community. I have people that care for me. I can pursue the gifts that God gave me. Praise God. It even helps to say it. Praise God. In that, you notice your large context. And you're not beholden to any of the smaller contexts of your life because you live in that one. Have a good time fishing today. Don't fight about who's got the best fish. Got you by the hook.